My 71-year-old life shattered instantly. My 7-year-old granddaughter gripped my hand, her eyes burning with sheer terror, whispering, "They're here, Grandma. We have to disappear right now." The air inside the vast, bustling O'Hare International Airport carried the bittersweet scent of departure, a mixture of old coffee, expensive perfume, and the faint metallic tang of jet fuel. I, Sylvia, a woman of 71, stood by the enormous glass window, my knuckles white as I gripped the pane. I was watching my only son, Julian, the anchor of my world, move away Farsam Gate 42. His flight to Copenhagen for an important business trip that would last 10 days. I silently offered a prayer, the kind of prayer mothers reserve for grown children out of sight. I felt the familiar maternal ache, a low, simmering emptiness. But that stillness was violently ripped apart, instantly. The small hand of Violet, my sweet granddaughter, a bright soul of only 7, suddenly squeezed mine with an alarming strength. She shed no tears for her departing father. Her typically mischievous emerald eyes now held a primal fear, an eerie certainty that cut through the terminal noise like a shard of sharp ice. He's gone. We need to leave this place right now. Violet burst out, not the fretful whine of a child, but an absolute command, a terrifying conviction. I looked down at her, confused. "What's wrong, darling?" "Daddy will be back in less than 2 weeks," I murmured, my voice automatically shifting into the reassuring tone one uses with an anxious child. But Violet's gaze was not fixed on the receding plane. Those beautiful emerald eyes mirroring her father's were staring intensely at something, or someone, directly behind me. Her face, usually radiant with the joy of a 7-year-old exploring the world, was now porcelain white, strained with an emotion far too old for her young heart. Pure, unadulterated fear. I had spent a lifetime, 7 decades, learning to trust my instincts. But I had learned a deeper lesson watching Julian grow up. Never dismiss the absolute conviction in a child's voice when they speak the truth. I pretended to adjust the silk scarf around my neck, a natural, leisurely movement, while my eyes scanned the glass wall, sweeping over the busy departure area behind us. And then, they were there. Near the entrance to the departure lounge, where the streams of people blurred, stood 2 figures. They were men, impeccably dressed in tailored midnight blue suits, not black, a subtle detail that spoke of expense, power, and intent. Their stance was not relaxed. It was military, utterly devoid of the usual airport weariness. They weren't looking at the departure board or their phones. Their attention, a palpable heavy weight, was locked onto us. My mind, which had been settling into comfortable retirement, suddenly snapped into high alert mode. This was no coincidence. This was the moment I had dreaded since Julian whispered those chilling words to me 3 months ago. "Mom, I found the proof. It's a multi-billion-dollar fraud. I can't go public yet, but if they suspect I have the files, we're all in danger." The 2 men, I dubbed them the phantoms in my head, began to move. Not running, not rushing, but the slow, inevitable movement of predators who have cornered their prey. "They're coming, Grandma Sylvia. They're going to take us." Violet's voice was now a desperate, barely audible plea, her hand pulling fiercely at my arm, dragging me toward the nearest service exit. The blood drained from my face, replaced by a surge of pure, vicious adrenaline. The sheer outrage, the absolute unholy fury that someone dared to threaten the life of my innocent granddaughter and my honest son, eclipsed the fear. This was not a spy novel twist. This was my life, being torn apart by greed and injustice. We couldn't run. We had to vanish. I took Violet's hand, not dragging her, but escaping the trap together. I summoned every bit of experience and cunning that 7 decades on Earth had taught me. We slipped through the crowds, rendered invisible by the sheer, overwhelming panic. The tension, the drama of that moment, felt like being sucked into a vortex of injustice and intense agony. Everything we had built, Julian and Violet's entire future, was at risk simply because of integrity. We had to act immediately. Beyond the thick steel door that slammed shut behind us, blocking out the polished facade of the main terminal, reality hit me with a steel punch. We were no longer mere travelers. We were fugitives in the vast, indifferent belly of a major international airport. The air here smelled of dust, disinfectant, and a terrifying urgency. "We have 5 minutes," I said, my voice low and cold, utterly devoid of the tremor I felt deep in my bones. My granddaughter, Violet, asked no questions. At 7, she grasped the fundamental, brutal truth: compliance means survival. This child, my sweet, gentle Violet, was now my indispensable partner in a high-stakes escape I never thought I was capable of at 71. The immediate goal was not the outside world, but changing the variables to make ourselves untraceable targets. I recalled Julian's detailed, chilling instructions, given to me in hushed midnight calls 3 months earlier. He had planned for this day, hoping it would never come. First, the digital footprint. I pulled 2 disposable, factory-sealed mobile phones from my oversized tote bag, which I always carried, ostensibly for knitting, but tonight it was a lifeline. The tote held more than yarn. It contained the remnants of our planned future. I crushed my personal smartphone under the heel of my expensive leather shoe, silencing the GPS tracker and rendering the entire digital history of my life unreadable. I did the same to Violet's small pink tablet. The sound of plastic shattering was the sound of my old life ending. "Violet, my love, I need you to focus. I need you to be my eyes," I instructed, handing her one of the activated burner phones. "If you see a man in a midnight blue suit, or anyone who looks like they are searching, not just walking, you tell me." No talking, just a tap on my arm. Her eyes, still wide with fear, reflected an incredible dawning resilience. She gave a single firm nod, her small chin held high. She was not playing a game. She was engaged in a war. We moved through a labyrinth of utility corridors, the harsh fluorescent lights casting long, sinister shadows. The emotional weight of the moment was almost unbearable. The sudden, painful transition from the safety of routine to the danger of uncertainty. 71 years of accumulated memories, possessions, and comfort, all sacrificed in 5 minutes at the cold, stark altar of survival. The outrage, the burning fury at the betrayal of trust, and the invasion of my family's peace powered my every step. We needed a clean getaway vehicle. Not my car, which was logged and traceable in the airport garage. We burst into the airport's rental car area, a chaotic hub of human activity that offered the perfect blend of cover and opportunity. I spotted a nondescript silver compact sedan being returned by a young couple in a hurry. They were arguing about a misplaced travel document, creating a magnificent distraction. I didn't steal the car, I improvised. I approached the rental desk with the sharp speed and urgency of an executive demanding satisfaction. "I am Mrs. Eleanor Vance," I lied, using the first of 3 fake identities Julian had prepared. My voice was crisp, authoritative, betraying none of my internal screaming. "I have misplaced my reservation information, but I need a car immediately." "A silver sedan? I need one now, or your manager will hear about the catastrophe your incompetence has caused." The desk clerk, an overwhelmed young man caught in the afternoon rush, stammered and quickly processed an available silver sedan, the very one the arguing couple was returning, handing me the keys without double-checking the ID. Blinded by my relentless urgency and the promise of a major complaint, I paid with a preloaded, untraceable debit card containing over $3,000, another piece in Julian's meticulous plan. The transaction took less than 1 minute. As I snatched the remote key, I risked a final glance back at the rental area entrance. My heart hammered a chaotic drumbeat against my ribs. There, emerging from the crowd, were the phantoms. They were sweeping their gaze, their eyes moving with the precision of surveillance equipment. Their movement was slower now, but more deliberate. They knew we were close. "Get in the car, Violet. Right now," I hissed, shoving the key fob into her trembling hand and pushing her toward the sedan. I didn't look back again. I slid into the driver's seat, my mind racing through calculations. Escape routes, traffic patterns, and the overwhelming fear of the invisible net tightening. As I drove out of the rental area, merging into the stream of departing cars, I caught one last, terrifying image in the side view mirror. One of the phantoms, pointing directly at our unremarkable silver car. We had escaped the airport, but the hunt had just begun. The silence in the car was heavy, broken only by my own ragged breathing. I felt an unbelievable exhaustion, but also a fierce protective love for the girl beside me. Julian was safe in the air temporarily. Our job was to ensure he had a family to come home to. As the silver sedan sliced through the relentless late-afternoon traffic of the interstate highway, taking us further and further away from the suffocating threat of the airport, the absolute blind panic began to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp fury. It was the fury of a woman who had been robbed, not of money, but of her peaceful future, her identity, and the innocent simplicity of her granddaughter's life. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, and glanced at Violet. She was silent, her head resting against the passenger window, her small body trembling with suppressed tension. She wasn't a 7-year-old taking a nap. She was a soldier on high alert, simply rationing her energy. The knowledge of her resilience, her unwavering trust in me, was the only thing keeping my composure from dissolving. I needed a distraction, something to anchor her, and to allow my 71-year-old mind to process the catastrophe. "Tell Grandma about your imaginary friend." "Sparkle," I asked, my voice softer now, steering the conversation back to the manageable realm of childhood fantasy. Violet paused, her eyes still tracking the passing cars before she spoke. "Sparkle says the men in the midnight blue coats are angry because Daddy knows where they hid 3 big stolen bags of silver." My blood ran cold. The detail was chillingly precise. Julian, my intelligent, utterly moral son, was an internal auditor for a massive, respectable-looking multinational corporation called Ethelred Global. 3 months ago, he had uncovered not just an accounting error, but an intricate, decades-long financial manipulation scheme. A system so vast that it involved the laundering of billions of dollars across 3 continents. The stolen silver wasn't bullion. It was massive, invisible debt, the hole in the company's books representing the stolen future of thousands of investors and employees. Julian had the proof. He had meticulously copied the files, 3 layers deep of encryption, hidden contracts onto secure, off-site servers. He had tried to deal with it internally, presenting the evidence to the chief executive officer, CEO, a man named Sir Alistair Thorne, a name now synonymous with betrayal and pure distilled malice in my mind. Thorne hadn't fired Julian. He had lauded him, promoted him, and then, slowly, subtly, began to isolate him, all while his secret security apparatus, an internal enforcement squad, began surveillance. "Violet," I said, my voice heavy with a terrible truth. "Daddy didn't steal silver. Daddy found lies. He's a hero because he tried to tell the truth, and the price of the truth is sometimes very high." This was the injustice that burned hotter than any fear. My son was being hunted for his integrity. It was the pain that pierces every parent's heart, the feeling of watching your child suffer for doing the right thing. We had followed Julian's procedure exactly. His flight to Copenhagen, a trip that was planned, well-publicized, was a deliberate decoy, designed to draw the enemy out into the open. The moment his plane was airborne, the security team would be notified that their primary target was safely out of the country, activating the secondary operation, neutralizing the family threat. They thought we would be easy targets, 2 women, 171 and 17, too emotional, too dependent, too slow. They underestimated the fierce, unshakable bond between a mother, a son, and a granddaughter. They underestimated Sylvia. Our immediate destination was a small, pre-booked motel near the state line, paid for in cash 6 months ago. It was a cold, hard psychological trick, hiding in plain sight but never checking in under the name used for the booking. "We are going to find a nice place to rest, darling. We are going to be Mrs. Eleanor Vance and her little niece, Miss Amelia Shaw," I whispered, drilling the names into my head. The slight shift in relationship, mother, daughter to aunt, niece, was crucial for breaking established patterns. As we drove, the sheer vastness of what we had left behind began to crash over me. My beautiful Victorian house, my late husband's beloved library, the photos, the memories, the comfortable certainty of my planned life. 7 decades of accumulation, gone, traded for a burner phone and a silver rental car. The material damage was staggering, but the emotional hole it tore through my life was a vast, echoing canyon. The worst part was the loneliness of the decision. I couldn't call my friends. I couldn't trust anyone. Every familiar face was a potential leak, a weakness. The world had narrowed to this single silver sedan and the 7-year-old beside me, but the anger gave me strength. It forged my 71-year-old fragility into a core of iron. Julian had passed the torch of responsibility, and I would not let the flame go out. He risked everything for the truth, and I would risk my final years for his safety. The multi-billion-dollar truth was now our burden, our curse, and our purpose. The motel was exactly as Julian's detailed notes had described. A low-slung, weary building painted a sickly mint green, strategically placed near the junction of 2 major interstate highways. It was a place of transience, where no one asked questions, and everyone was eager to be somewhere else. It was the perfect cloak of anonymity. I pulled the car into a spot near the back, under a flickering sodium vapor lamp, away from the lobby and the relentless gaze of the security cameras. It was past 8 o'clock and the darkness felt like a welcome, suffocating blanket. "Stay here, Violet. Don't open the door for anyone and don't make a sound," I commanded, my voice betraying none of my anxiety. I slipped $5 into her hand, a foolish, comforting gesture. "Pretend you are a spy guarding a very important secret." I walked toward the office, every instinct screaming caution. I would not check in under the name Eleanor Vance that held the reservation. That was the lure. I used the second identity Julian had prepared, Mrs. Dorothy Finch. I approached the night clerk, a tired-looking man in a stained uniform, and explained with a dramatic sigh that my car had broken down 3 miles back and I was desperately in need of a room for the night. I paid with crisp, clean $100 bills, cash that had been stored in my safe deposit box for years, faintly smelling of old paper and dust. "Room 207, ma'am. Back corner. No view," the clerk mumbled, handing me the key card. "Perfect," I replied, a small, cold smile on my face. No view meant fewer windows, less visibility, and less temptation for the curious. Room 207 was everything a safe house should be: sterile, anonymous, and forgettable. As soon as the door was locked, secured with a chain and a rubber wedge I carried in my tote, I felt a sudden, dizzying wave of exhaustion wash over my 71-year-old body. The high-voltage adrenaline of the airport dash had burned itself out, leaving a residue of physical and emotional ruin. I collapsed onto the edge of one of the stiff double beds. This was the moment of reckoning, the first pause in our desperate flight. I looked at Violet, who had begun inspecting the room's fixtures with the intense curiosity of a child. She walked to the window, pulling the thick, light-blocking drape aside. "Grandma?" she whispered, pointing. "The moon tonight is only a little fingernail." I felt a sudden, powerful surge of emotion, a tidal wave of profound sadness and fierce love. This child, who should have been worrying about lost teeth and schoolyard squabbles, was paying attention to the phases of the moon because she had been forced to be acutely aware of the world outside, of darkness and light, of things hidden. I crossed the room and pulled her into my arms, holding her so tightly that my own tears, the first since the flight took off, finally began to fall. "I am so sorry, my brave girl," I sobbed into her soft hair. "I am so sorry we have to do this." Violet did not cry. She patted my shoulder with the very gesture of protection I had used with her just minutes earlier. "It's okay, Grandma. We are together. Daddy said the most important thing is that we keep the truth safe." The phrase "keep the truth safe" echoed between us, a solemn vow. It was my son's legacy, a non-negotiable principle that now dictated our every action. We ate dinner of crackers, dried fruit and bottled water from the tote, a sparse meal, but consumed with a desperate hunger that was more than physical. It was a hunger for safety. Before settling down for sleep, I made the first secure contact. I used the burner phone and dialed a 10-digit number that only Julian and I knew. It was a burner number he had given to Sarah, his ex-wife and Violet's mother, who lived 100 miles away. The phone rang 3 times before a crackling voice on the other end answered. "Hello, Sarah, it's Sylvia," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Listen to me, and don't ask any questions until I'm finished. The Ethelred global situation has escalated. They know, they are acting. Julian is safe for now, but his plane was a diversion. They are hunting his family. They tried to take Violet and me at the airport." The line went silent for a beat that felt like an eternity. I could hear Sarah's shallow, rapid breathing, a sound of pure horror. "My car is traceable. My phone is traceable. I don't know what to do," Sarah whispered back, her voice shaking violently. The pain in her voice was a direct hit to my heart. "You are 100 miles from a motel called the Mint Leaf Inn. You need to check out right now. Get in your car, drive to the nearest Walmart, buy 1 burner phone, and then drive continuously for 7 hours, until you are 200 miles north of your current location. Find a truck stop, call this burner number back. I will not stop until you are safe too. Julian needs his family. You are part of the truth we have to keep safe." I hung up without waiting for her reply. The cold, brutal reality was that this was not a time for comfort. It was a time for clean, uncompromising orders. The 3 of us were now bound by an invisible chain of multi-billion-dollar peril. The motel room, the bed, the plastic-wrapped cups, all were temporary illusions. We were at war, and our first battle was won. But the night was long, and the enemy was relentless. The next morning, the sun piercing through the grimy motel window was not a beacon of hope, but a glaring spotlight illuminating our absolute fragility. I watched the world wake up through the narrow slit of the curtains. Truckers starting engines, families loading luggage, people moving with the carefree rhythm of those who believe in tomorrow. I envied their blissful ignorance. I was operating on less than 3 hours of fitful, adrenaline-fueled sleep. My body ached, not just from the strain, but from the realization that my age, 71, was now a dangerous liability, a ticking clock in this terrifying pursuit. I had to be faster, smarter, and more ruthless than ever before. Violet, surprisingly, seemed revitalized. She was drawing on a pad of paper I had pulled from the tote, sketching the 2 men in midnight blue suits, exaggerated cartoonish figures with menacing expressions. It was her way of processing the trauma, transforming the monstrous into something manageable. The tension in the room was a low, constant hum, broken only by the crackle of the burner phone I kept clenched at my hip. Sarah, Julian's ex-wife, had to call back. I had given her an order that required not just bravery, but an absolute blind trust in me, her former mother-in-law. Our relationship had always been civil, but strained, a delicate truce maintained for Violet. Now, it needed to be a bond forged in the fire of shared terror. Just before 9 o'clock, the phone vibrated, a restricted number. I answered on the first ring. "Sylvia? It's Sarah, I did what you said. I'm at a truck stop near Toledo. I'm alone, I trust you. But what has Julian gotten us into?" Her voice was raw, choked with unshed tears. I felt a surge of relief so intense it almost buckled my knees. Sarah was safe and she was on board. This was an unexpected victory. Sarah was a sharp young lawyer, a different kind of strength, one based on legal acumen and strategic thinking. She was the ally we desperately needed. "He hasn't gotten us into anything, Sarah. He's gotten us out of a multi-billion-dollar lie," I explained, quickly summarizing the core truth. Julian's discovery, Thorne's betrayal, and the activation of the corporate assassination squad. They want the evidence Julian secured, and they want us silenced. But they assumed we would panic and stay put. "So, what is the next step?" "Where do we go?" she asked, the lawyer in her instantly overriding the panic, demanding facts and strategy. "We are heading towards the Canadian border, not to cross it, but to use the shift in traffic as a cover. We need to get to Julian's final contingency location, the safe house in Saskatchewan that he prepared 2 years ago. But first, we need to completely change our transportation and our identities for all three of us. I instructed her to abandon her car at the truck stop, leaving it exactly as if she had just gone for coffee, and find a bus heading southwest, away from my current location. The key was to break every predictable pattern and create a tangled web of travel. You need to blend in, Sarah. No credit cards. Cash only. You are now Miss Vivian Lowell, a recent college graduate traveling for her first job interview. Wear brighter clothes. Smile. Become forgettable by being too memorable. As I spoke these words, the irony was not lost on me. I was instructing my former daughter-in-law to embrace a life of deception, a life I myself was forced into at 71. Yet the maternal fire in me burned so bright that I felt capable of anything. I would learn to be a master of disguise, a logistical genius, a ruthless protector, all for Violet and Julian. After the call, I looked at the drawing Violet had completed. The two phantoms were now standing next to a large storm cloud, looking angry. "What is the cloud, darling?" I asked softly. "It's the lie, Grandma," she said, her voice small but clear. "It's big, and it hides the sun, but it can't stop the rain from coming down." Her simple wisdom was a painful reminder of what was at stake. The impending storm of the multi-billion-dollar scandal, and our fragile hope of weathering it together. We were just 3 women, miles apart, bound by blood and a devastating secret, fighting an unseen enemy who controlled governments and markets. But with Sarah in the fight, we were stronger. We were a unit. The escape had become a calculated mission of resistance. The plan for the next 48 hours was complex, requiring a level of logistical precision that would have made a military general proud. It was all laid out in the encrypted hard drive Julian had given me, disguised as a USB of family photos. This was no fanciful flight. It was a blueprint for survival, a testament to my son's desperate foresight. Our primary objective? To become ghosts. I checked out of the motel using the original decoy name, Eleanor Vance, leaving a cash payment and a note saying we had an emergency and had left early. This was meant to send the phantoms on a wild goose chase if they traced the cash booking. I then drove the silver sedan 30 miles to a suburban shopping center garage, deliberately choosing the roof level, where the cameras were older and less effective. I didn't park the silver sedan. I simply abandoned it, unlocked, engine running, with the radio blasting loud, upbeat country music, the final symbol of a distracted, harmless suburban driver. I placed Mrs. Dorothy Finch's car key by the ignition, a trail of breadcrumbs designed to send the phantoms on a furious chase after a stolen car that wasn't stolen and a woman who had vanished. This is the trickiest part. "Violet," I whispered, holding her hand as we slipped down a service stairwell. Emerging into the center's bustling service area, we have to disappear inside the normal. Our attire had to change. I, 71, normally impeccably dressed in classic, elegant attire, was painfully conspicuous. I led Violet through the back of a large department store, straight to the fitting rooms. We spent $2,000, all cash, on clothes that were deliberately dull, blending perfectly with the crowds, baggy gray sweatshirts, wide-legged denim, baseball caps, and, most importantly, cheap disposable reading glasses for me. I even bought a pair of thick, cushioned orthopedic insoles to subtly alter my height and gait. The woman who walked into the department store was Sylvia, the respectable mother. The woman who walked out was Janet Pierce, a tired, slightly hunched traveler, a face instantly forgettable. Violet was transformed from a brightly dressed child into a small, bundled shape, her vibrant emerald eyes hidden beneath the shadow of a wide hood. Her spirit, however, remained untouched. "I look like a spy in a movie," she giggled softly, a sound that, for the first time since the airport, carried genuine childish joy. The innocence was fragile, but present. We walked through the mall, not toward the exit, but toward a specific, pre-arranged bus route Julian had mapped out. The bus took us out of the suburbs and directly to a vast, sprawling freight train yard on the industrial edge of the city. It was here, amidst the roar of diesel engines and the metallic shriek of coupling train cars, that we met Sarah. She was standing next to a large, green container dressed exactly as I had instructed. A bright, slightly too large yellow jacket, clutching a well-worn travel paperback. She looked anxious but determined. The sight of Violet running into her mother's arms, the raw, beautiful emotion of the reunion, was almost unbearable. It was a moment of pure, intense love, a powerful antidote to the fear. "I have the tickets," Sarah whispered, her voice even. "The train to Winnipeg. The car I abandoned at the truck stop will send them 2 states in the wrong direction." "Well done, Sarah," I said, a surge of pride rising. "The 3 of us are now in the clear. Janet Pierce, Vivian Lowell, and Amelia Shaw, Violet's new alias, are traveling together. We are a slightly dysfunctional family reunion." We boarded the train under the cover of the evening rush, settling into the anonymity of the railcar seats. As the train began its rhythmic, lurching journey north, I looked out the window. The city lights were receding, and with them the last vestiges of my previous life. The emotional cost of this self-destruction was immense. To willingly tear up a life of identity, to become a lie, it was a profound, painful form of sacrifice. I closed my eyes, the exhaustion now a physical burden. We were a trio of fugitives, the 71-year-old grandmother, the determined mother, and the brave 7-year-old oracle, bound for a new, uncertain future, fueled only by the multi-billion-dollar truth that demanded our disappearance. The journey across the American Midwest became a dizzying blur of shared paranoia and forced, unnatural normalcy. For 2 full days, we were confined to the rattling metal tube of the long-distance train, relying solely on cash, burner phones, and the constantly shifting cover stories we drilled into the ground. Every stop, every announcement, every set of footsteps in the aisle was a potential threat, a moment when the 2 phantoms in midnight blue suits could materialize. Sarah, now Vivian Lowell, proved an invaluable asset. Her legal mind, trained to spot inconsistencies and exploit loopholes, gave our escape a cold strategic edge. She spent hours reviewing Julian's encrypted files, the family photos, on the small, secure laptop he had provided, searching for any flaws in his planning, any overlooked variable the phantoms might exploit. "They're not just looking for us." "Sylvia," she whispered late one night, her face illuminated by the cold light of the screen. "They're looking for the USB drive, and they know Julian would give it to the person he trusted most, you. They'll be tracing any travel pattern that breaks the mold, any sudden, unplanned movement." I gripped the physical USB drive, hidden in the lining of my new drab canvas tote bag. The secret of Ethelred Global, the proof of the multi-billion-dollar fraud, was physically contained within this tiny piece of plastic. It felt less like a key to freedom and more like a live explosive strapped to my chest. The closest moment of danger came on our second day, during a scheduled 30-minute stop in a small, remote town in North Dakota. We had all spilled out of the train to stretch our legs and grab a quick meal, cash only, from a dreary diner across the street. The diner was busy, loud, and offered the perfect psychological camouflage. I sat with Violet, now Amelia, in a booth by the window, while Sarah stood in the endless line for the restroom. I was watching Violet as she meticulously counted 7 peas on her plate, a small, comforting ritual, when my peripheral vision registered a familiar, chilling presence. Across the street, emerging from a sleek, unmarked black sedan, a car utterly out of place in this town of used pickup trucks, were the phantoms. They weren't looking at the diner. They were looking at the train station. They were too late. They had traced the silver sedan decoy, then the cash withdrawal at the motel, and were now guessing our general direction. But they had guessed the wrong train or the wrong stop. They were looking for Eleanor Vance, not Janet Pierce. My heart hammered so fiercely it threatened to crack my ribs. The adrenaline was a toxic shock, making my fingers tingle. This wasn't a movie. The villains were real, they were close, and they were hunting. I maintained absolute stillness, the hardest act of my 71-year-old life. I didn't look up. I didn't reach for Violet. I calmly dipped a cracker into my tomato soup, the picture of a tired, bored grandmother waiting for a train. "Violet," I whispered, my voice incredibly calm, and even that I barely recognized it as my own. "Don't look up. Your imaginary friend Sparkle just told Grandma a secret. There is a blue suit outside. He's checking the train. If he sees us, the game is over. Can you keep the secret?" Violet's small body instantly stiffened. Her small hand reaching for a potato chip slowly retracted. She looked down at her plate, her emerald eyes locked onto the 7 peas. She gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, confirming her understanding of the life-or-death stakes. Sarah, emerging from the restroom line, spotted them instantly. Her face, visible through the diner window, went pale with an immediate shock that was instantly replaced by a steady, razor-sharp composure. She saw me, saw Violet's stillness, and understood. She didn't come to the booth. That would attract attention. Instead, Sarah did something utterly brilliant. She walked straight past the booth to the jukebox in the corner and loudly, dramatically, slammed a $5 bill into the machine, selecting a song, a loud, raucous rock anthem from the 1980s. The sudden, overwhelming explosion of music filled the diner, drowning out the low hum of conversation, instantly forcing everyone to either talk louder or stop talking. The resulting chaos was the perfect cover. I took Violet's hand, and under the cover of the sonic assault, we slipped out the back door, used the alley to circle the block, and sprinted back to the train station just as the conductor was calling all aboard for the final time. As we climbed the steps back onto the train, I risked a final glance back. The phantoms were still at the station entrance, consulting a list, their expressions grim. Sarah's loud music had bought us the most valuable commodity in the world, 30 seconds of mayhem. I slumped into my seat, the adrenaline now giving way to dizzying nausea. I had faced peril before, illness, loss, grief, but never the cold, calculating threat of powerful, wicked men. This was a battle against the very concept of injustice, and we had just, miraculously, won the skirmish. The proximity of the threat only solidified my resolve. The train finally arrived in Winnipeg, the vast, sprawling Canadian city that served as our final launch pad before the true isolation of Saskatchewan. We moved with the trained anonymity of seasoned operatives, using the cash reserve and the 3 layers of false identities Julian had prepared. The near miss in North Dakota had heightened our collective paranoia, but it had also solidified our teamwork. Our mission now was to establish a temporary, secure base, a communication hub, where I could initiate the first contact with Julian since his flight. This was the most emotionally dangerous step. We rented a small, nondescript downtown apartment for 7 days, paying the entire $1,700 in cash to a landlord who preferred not to ask for references. Sarah, using her sharp legal instincts, had secured a small military-grade, satellite-linked secure phone, the only way to communicate with Julian without the risk of interception by Ethelred Global's surveillance teams. The moment came on our 4th night of freedom. Violet was soundly asleep, exhausted by the ceaseless strain. Sarah stood by the window, her gaze sweeping the street below with the intensity of a born guard. I held the satellite phone, its heavy casing cold in my trembling hands. I dialed the secure, prearranged 15-digit number. The connection was slow, painfully distant, filled with the static of space and fear. "Hello?" Julian's voice, muffled and crackling, finally answered. It was the sound of my life returning to me, but also the sound of terrible, guilty isolation. "Julian, it's Mom. We are safe. We are in Winnipeg. Violet is here, and Sarah is with us." There was a ragged, choked sound on the other end, the sound of a strong man breaking under the unbearable weight of his own decisions. "Oh, Mom. Oh, God, Mom. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry I pulled you into this. I saw them. I saw the phantoms at the gate, even as the plane was taxiing away. I called the burner phone the second we were airborne, but I couldn't reach you. I felt so helpless, so useless. The pain in his voice was 1,000 times worse than the terror of the airport. It was the sound of a son's self-reproach, the agonizing realization of the sacrifice his family was making. "Stop it, Julian," I commanded, my voice firm, but my eyes wet with tears. This was no time for regret. You did the only thing a moral man could do. You chose the truth over a multi-billion-dollar lie. You chose Violet's world over Thorne's corruption. You are not useless, you are a hero. The pain we are feeling is the price of that heroism. We spent 20 minutes in a quick, highly encrypted conversation. He confirmed his location. A secure military-grade bunker owned by a trusted former colleague in an undisclosed location outside Copenhagen. He confirmed the contingency plan. Saskatchewan next, followed by a final, permanent relocation to a small farm in New Zealand under completely new identities. A future that involved learning to speak with a slightly different accent and leaving everything familiar behind. Then, the hardest part, Violet. I handed the phone to my former daughter-in-law. Sarah had the difficult task of managing the emotional exchange. She woke Violet and gently guided her to the phone. "Daddy?" Violet's small voice was instantly awake, filled with a heartbreaking mixture of relief and confusion. "My brave girl. My little spy. I miss you so much," Julian said, his voice instantly softening, filled with overwhelming paternal love. "Daddy, are you safe? The men in the midnight blue coats are looking for us. Grandma and Mommy are very good at hiding. We are keeping the truth safe, Daddy, just like you asked." The simple, unvarnished pride in her voice. The fact that she viewed this traumatic escape not as a horrible injustice, but as a high-stakes protection game, was a devastating testament to her resilience. "You are the bravest girl in the whole wide world, Violet. You are the one who saved us. You are the keeper of the truth," Julian choked out. The call ended abruptly, the line automatically cutting to prevent tracking. I collapsed into the chair, the exhaustion complete. The sacrifice was enormous. A father separated from his daughter, a mother destroying the comfort of her life. But the conversation had achieved its purpose. Julian knew we were safe, and we were revitalized by his love and moral clarity. We were ready for the next, most isolated leg of our journey. Our transition from Winnipeg to the remote safe house in Saskatchewan was the most psychologically demanding part of the journey. It involved 2 different rental cars, each paid for in cash with a different alias, and a nearly 15-hour drive through the vast, lonely Canadian prairies. The landscape itself felt like a mirror of our internal state, endless, cold, and utterly exposed. The safe house, a small, heavily insulated cabin on the edge of a massive provincial park, was completely off-grid. It had a satellite dish for emergency communication, a fully stocked pantry, and a heavy, reinforced steel door. Julian had meticulously prepared it 2 years earlier, purchasing the land through 3 different shell companies registered in 3 different countries. It was a true solitary fortress. It was here, in the enforced quiet of our remote sanctuary, that I began to fully appreciate the extraordinary, frightening gift of my granddaughter, Violet. Her ability to sense danger wasn't just a child's intuition. It was a profound, almost psychic alarm system. She had saved us at O'Hare, but her sixth sense continued to operate with alarming precision in our new isolated reality. On our 3rd day in the cabin, I was preparing a simple dinner. Sarah was meticulously cleaning the small wood-burning stove, removing any potential trace of DNA, when Violet suddenly stopped playing with a set of wooden blocks. "Grandma," she said, her voice dropping to the serious adult whisper she reserved for life-or-death matters. "There's a cold spot outside the west window." I looked out. The window faced the dense, impenetrable forest. Nothing but snow-dusted pine trees and deepening shadow. The temperature was well below freezing. "What do you mean, darling?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, but instantly alert. "It's a different kind of cold," she explained, frowning, her small face wrinkled in concentration. "Not the cold of the wind. It's the cold of being looked at. Sparkle says someone is watching us from behind the big rock and their thoughts are making the air heavy." My blood ran cold. The nearest main road was 15 miles away. It felt almost impossible that the phantoms could have tracked us here so quickly, so silently. but I trusted Violet's instinct over my own logic. I signaled Sarah with a quick, coded hand gesture, a scratch behind the ear that Julian had taught us for absolute silence and immediate action. Sarah understood instantly. The lawyer-turned-operative grabbed the heavy, crowbar-like poker from the fireplace, our only real means of defense, and moved silently to the west window. She did not look out. Instead, she gently positioned a small, polished aluminum cookie sheet against the glass, tilted slightly to act as a wide-angle mirror. What she saw sent a spasm of horror through her. Reflected in the subtle curve of the metal were not two, but three figures. They were heavily bundled in hunting gear, blending perfectly with the desolate landscape, but their binoculars were trained directly on the cabin. One of them, I saw with dread, was pulling out a satellite phone, likely to confirm our location before making their move. They hadn't tracked us physically. They had been waiting. They had used Julian's known pattern, his obsession with self-sufficiency, to predict his most likely isolated safe house. They were not chasing us. They were anticipating us. "Violet, you saved us again," I whispered, pulling her into a fierce, grateful hug. Sarah and I worked in silent, practiced synchronicity. We did not panic. Panic was a luxury we could not afford. We grabbed the emergency go bags, small, identical backpacks containing a change of clothes, cash, water, and the single most critical item, Julian's encrypted USB drive. We used the back exit, a small, disguised door built into the cabin's attached woodshed, and ran. Not towards the main road, but deeper into the silent, dense woods, following the barely visible trail Julian had marked 2 years earlier. Running through the freezing Canadian wilderness, my 71-year-old lungs burning with every gasping breath, I felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. The terror was from the proximity of the threat. The exhilaration was from the confirmation that my family's true strength did not lie in money or possessions, but in an unshakable, protective love that transcended logic and even time. We were a family of women, fueled by a father's truth and a grandmother's love, guided by the unnerving sixth sense of a 7-year-old. The multi-billion-dollar lie of Ethelred Global had followed us even here, but we had slipped its grasp once more, vanishing into the silent, white forest. The next 24 hours were a nightmare of relentless, bone-deep cold and desperate forward movement. We moved on foot across the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Canadian parkland, relying only on a small, handheld compass and the detailed survival training course Julian had insisted I take 4 years ago. My 71-year-old joints screamed with every step, a constant, aching reminder of my physical limitations. The emotional toll of the loss here was different. At the airport, we lost possessions. Here, we lost our last sanctuary, the last place we could feel a semblance of safety. Being forced back into the wilderness, with the constant threat of hypothermia and pursuit, caused a deep emotional breakdown. That afternoon, huddled inside a temporary shelter Sarah had skillfully constructed from pine boughs and a thermal blanket, I hit my lowest point. The sheer exhaustion and the continuous stress cracked my composure. I started to cry, not the quiet, dignified tears of an older woman, but the raw, shaking sobs of a child who had lost everything. "I can't do this, Sarah," I whispered, the words catching in my throat, each one a surrender. "I'm too old. My body is failing. I should have stayed home. I should have let them take me and let Violet and Julian be free. I'm a burden. I'm why we have to keep running." Sarah did not offer platitudes or empty reassurance. She sat beside me, her own face streaked with dirt and exhaustion, but her eyes burning with a fierce, steady flame. She was the calm center of our storm. "Sylvia," she said, her voice firm and uncompromising, the lawyer in her speaking to the judge of my self-doubt. "You are not a burden. You are why we are alive. Do you remember what Violet whispered at the airport? He's gone. We need to leave now. She wouldn't have had the strength to do that without you. Julian wouldn't have done this without knowing you were the one protecting his daughter." She paused, then delivered the brutal, necessary truth. "If you had stayed, they would have tortured you for the USB drive. And when they were done, they would have used you to lure Julian back from Europe. Your life is no longer about your comfort. It is about the multi-billion-dollar truth Julian risked everything for. Your decision to run your physical pain, that is your sacrifice. That is your strength. Julian needs his mother whole, and Violet needs her grandmother to teach her that she should never give up on the truth. Her words were harsh, painful, and absolutely necessary. They dragged me out of the abyss of self-pity I was sinking into. The agony of the lie that I was too weak, too old, too tired, was the most dangerous lie of all. The real enemy was not the men in the woods, but the temptation to simply stop and surrender. I looked at Violet, sleeping soundly between us, her cheek resting on my lap. She looked so small, so innocent, yet she carried the weight of this terrible reality with remarkable grace. I thought about the huge, invisible network of corruption Ethelred Global represented, a network built on deceit, greed, and the crushing of honest people. My personal pain, the exhaustion of my 71 years, suddenly seemed insignificant in the face of that injustice. "You're right, Sarah," I mumbled, wiping the tears from my face with a trembling hand. "I won't stop. We will make it to the border. We will make it to New Zealand. We will buy that little farm Julian found, and we will start a new life where the truth can breathe freely." The resolve returned, not as the adrenaline-fueled panic of the airport, but as a deep, unshakable commitment forged in the cold, unforgiving Canadian woods. The emotional breakdown had been a cleansing fire, burning away the last remnants of my comfortable, privileged past. I was no longer Sylvia the grandmother. I was Janet Pierce, the relentless protector, driven by the knowledge that the highest moral calling is the defense of your family's honor. The next phase of our escape, detailed in Julian's deepest encrypted files, involved utilizing the vast, complex, and largely unsupervised North American freight rail system. It was the Iron Road to a fleeting, temporary freedom. We walked for another 1 day and 1 night through the wilderness, using the sun and stars as our guide, fueled only by a fierce primal survival instinct. My 71-year-old body, though aching with every movement, was now operating on pure spiritual will. The sight of the massive winding steel rails, stretching across the desolate landscape like an artery, was a moment of profound relief. Our target was a rail yard 3 hours east, a prearranged pickup point Julian had, secured through a highly trusted intermediary, a retired logistics expert named Mr. Alistair, no relation to the wicked, Thorne. We found the location exactly as described, an isolated loading dock, a broken-down utility truck parked nearby, and a coded signal, a piece of bright red ribbon tied to a rusted fence post. Mr. Alistair was waiting. He was a man in his 60s, his face lined with kindness and the deep exhaustion of someone who has seen too much of the world's hidden darkness. He asked no questions. He simply saw the terror in my eyes and Sarah's fierce protective posture, and he understood. "The train leaves in 1 hour," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It's a grain transport. You'll be in an empty boxcar, sealed from the outside. You'll be cold, but you'll be invisible. It's heading south to the American border near Montana, where you'll make the final jump before heading to the coast." He looked at Violet, who was clinging to my coat, her emerald eyes tracking his every move with wary tension. "You're a very brave girl," he told her gently. "You're keeping the secret safe, aren't you?" Violet nodded, clinging tighter. "The lie is outside, Mr. Alistair, but we are inside the truth." Her wisdom, always so profound, brought a fresh wave of tears to my eyes. The emotional farewell with Mr. Alistair was quick and agonizing. He gave me one last, untraceable phone number for emergency contact at our final coastal destination, along with a heavy, waterproof box containing several $1,000s in crisp $50 bills. Then, the terrifying descent into the boxcar. It was dark, frigid, and faintly smelled of grain dust. Sarah and I helped Violet climb in first, then scrambled in after her. Mr. Alistair bolted the heavy steel door from the outside, the final echoing thud feeling like a coffin lid closing. We were alone again, enveloped in the darkness. The train began to move almost immediately, the metallic, lurching screech of the wheels on the track quickly becoming a monotonous, deafening rhythm. I used the time to mentally rehearse the final, most terrifying phase of our escape, the confrontation at the coast. Julian's plan, revealed in his deepest encrypted files, involved a face-to-face meeting with an operative of Sir Alistair Thorne, the wicked CEO of Ethelred Global. Julian knew that Ethelred would not stop until they had the USB drive. He had arranged a trap, a meticulously planned exchange. The boxcar was a place of deep, profound reflection. I thought of my life, the life I had lost, my late husband, my garden, the quiet comfort of my home. It was all a ghost. The only things that mattered were Violet's future and Julian's integrity. The cold, brutal courage my son had to possess to plan the self-destruction of his family's life, all for global honesty, was almost unbearable. I looked at Sarah, huddled on the floor, her eyes closed but her face resolute. She was no longer just my ex-daughter-in-law. She was my comrade, a protective shield for my granddaughter. The multi-billion-dollar lie had failed to destroy my family. Instead, it had galvanized us, stripping away the trivial and exposing the fierce, unbreakable core of our love. The train rattled toward the American border, carrying us like a message in a bottle toward the final, desperate act of our defense. After a grueling journey of nearly 2 days in the unheated boxcar, followed by a series of short, cash-paid bus rides and rental car changes, we arrived at our final American destination, a small, wind-battered fishing town on the Oregon coast. This was the nexus point, the terrifying location where Julian's plan required me to play my most dangerous role, the decoy and the negotiator. The meeting was set for noon the following day, on the isolated docks behind the old cannery. The entire exchange was designed to be a trap for the villains, but it felt terrifyingly like a trap for us. I spent the final night with Sarah and Violet in a small, cheap seaside cabin, the smell of salt and decay filling the air. We rehearsed the plan, the cold, hard logic in Julian's strategy overriding my maternal instinct to run and hide. The plan was simple, brutal, and utterly reliant on the power of the multi-billion-dollar evidence. At 11:45 in the morning, I walked alone onto the docks, my drab utilitarian travel clothes on, the heavy canvas tote with the USB drive slung across my body. I was 71, but I moved with the slow, deliberate confidence of a woman with nothing left to lose. The tide was out, exposing slick black rocks. The air was heavy with the silence of anticipation. At precisely noon, a sleek, high-end motorboat appeared, cutting across the choppy water. It docked with practiced ease. Stepping onto the pier was a single terrifying figure, not Sir Alistair Thorne, but his closest lieutenant, a woman known only by the code name The Architect. She was elegantly dressed, her eyes hard and emotionless, a perfect mirror for the corporate soullessness of Ethelred Global. "You are Sylvia," the architect stated, her voice crisp and clinical, the sound of a scalpel. "The elderly woman who holds the key to a $10 billion corporate security crisis. I am the woman who holds the truth that will put Sir Alistair Thorne in prison for the rest of his miserable life," I retorted, my voice surprisingly steady, powered by the memory of Violet's terrified face. The confrontation was breathtakingly tense. The architect demanded the USB drive. I refused, demanding proof that Julian was alive and safe. The exchange was a delicate high-stakes dance, my son's life and my granddaughter's safety resting on every word. I noticed a detail in the architect's posture, a faint tremble in her left hand that betrayed her self-assurance. Sarah had trained me on this. Look for the lie. The tremor suggested that the risk to Thorne's empire was even greater than we knew. "I will give you the USB drive," I announced, my voice ringing with false finality. "But first you must hear this. Julian did not make one copy of the files. He made 100 copies, and 75 of those copies are already in the hands of international journalists, prosecutors, and police forces, set to be released 48 hours from now, unless I send an encrypted message to prevent the release." It was a complete, Calculated lie, a masterful piece of misinformation Julian had built into the exchange. The truth was that the USB drive I held was the only functional copy, but the architect could not risk the possibility that the lie was the truth. Her composure shattered. Her eyes, which had been cold steel, flashed with pure, unadulterated terror. "You are bluffing. We will apprehend you, or worse, apprehend me, for exposing a $10 billion fraud?" I laughed, a dry, bitter sound containing all the accumulated pain and fury of my flight. "Go ahead. Every lawyer you hire will be on the front page of every major newspaper in 2 days. The USB drive is the only thing that can save Thorne now. Take it and you save his life. Refuse it, and I send the release now code." Then I performed the final, agonizing act. I threw the USB drive onto the slick, moss-covered rocks beneath the pier, where it slid precariously close to the high tide mark. "Take it. The files are yours," I yelled. "But you will have to destroy the evidence in front of me, and then you will have to let me and my family leave for New Zealand. If we are not on the prearranged boat in 1 hour, the code is activated." The lure was irresistible. The architect, blinded by the desperation to retrieve the multi-billion-dollar evidence, cursed loudly and scrambled down onto the treacherous rocks. As she did, a small, heavily powered skiff, piloted by Sarah and carrying a small, bundled figure, Violet, shot out from behind the cannery. The exchange was complete. The architect had the drive and the devastating lie about the 75 copies, and we had our freedom. The next 1 hour was a blur of high-speed transit. The skiff took us not to a commercial port but to a hidden, nondescript fishing trawler waiting 5 miles offshore, a boat chartered by Julian's final, most reliable contact, a retired naval officer. As the trawler began its long, lonely voyage across the vast Pacific, carrying us toward the distant promise of New Zealand, the adrenaline finally subsided, leaving a residue of emotional devastation. I collapsed onto a narrow, cramped metal bunk in the small cabin, my 71-year-old body finally succumbing to overwhelming exhaustion. Sarah and Violet huddled beside me, the three of us a small, fierce cluster of survival in the endless rolling blue. The ocean was a perfect symbol of our current reality. Vast, unpredictable, and utterly unforgiving. We were traversing the ocean of truth, leaving the continent of deceit behind. The emotional toll of the dock confrontation was deep. I had wagered my life, my son's life, and my granddaughter's future on a calculated risk and a powerful lie. The feeling of complete self-destruction, the stripping away of all my comfort, security, and identity, was now augmented by the agonizing guilt of having to use deceit to save the truth. "Grandma," Violet whispered, her voice barely audible over the engine noise. "Did the lie follow us to New Zealand?" I pulled her close, kissing her forehead. Her innocence was the most precious thing in my new terrifying world. "No, darling. The lie is gone. It is now buried on the Oregon coast, trapped inside the architect's head. The truth, Julian's truth, is sailing with us, right here. We had won the battle, but the war had cost us everything material. We were arriving in New Zealand not as tourists or wealthy expatriates, but as stateless refugees with minimal cash and completely manufactured identities. We were the Shaw family, Amelia, the grandmother, Vivian, the mother, and Lila, the child. I thought of Julian, alone in the European bunker, awaiting the coded message confirming our escape. His moral clarity, the decision to expose the multi-billion-dollar fraud, had forced us onto this path, but it was also the reason we were alive. The painful sacrifice was necessary to preserve his soul. Sarah spoke up, her voice thick with emotion. I never understood why Julian was so obsessed with fixing every wrong, even the small ones. Now I see it. It wasn't an obsession. It was his moral compass. If he had compromised, if he had let Thorne win, he would have destroyed the man his daughter needs him to be. Her insight was a perfect crystallization of the profound, painful lesson we had learned. The highest form of love is not the protection from pain, but the preservation of your loved one's integrity. The journey was long, lonely, and filled with the terrifying uncertainty of starting over. I was leaving behind the final vestiges of my American life, my past, my history, my very comfortable language. I would be Amelia Shaw, a new woman in a new land, speaking with a different accent, learning to navigate a world where I had no history, no friends, and no anchors except my family. But as the first golden light of dawn broke over the endless, shimmering ocean, creating a long, bright path toward the distant southern hemisphere, I felt a deep, powerful sense of resolve. I had looked straight into the worst form of corporate evil and found myself capable. I was not just a grandmother. I was a warrior. The first sight of New Zealand, the incredibly green hills of the South Island, was like seeing a world reborn. It was a place of stunning, quiet beauty, a land that felt utterly untouched by the greed and corruption we had fled. It was the perfect antidote to the multi-billion-dollar lie of Ethelred Global. We arrived in the small, peaceful town of Queenstown, where we were met by Julian's final intermediary, a woman named Elspeth. She drove us to the small, remote farm he had purchased 2 years prior, our final sanctuary, our garden of truth. The farm was simple: a small house, a barn, and 200 sheep grazing serenely on the rolling hills. It was a life I never could have envisioned in my comfortable suburban home, a life of labor, silence, and self-sufficiency. I stood on the porch, my 71-year-old hands gripping the faded wooden railing, watching Violet run across the grass, chasing 3 playful lambs. She was laughing, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that I had not heard since the moment her father's plane took off. She was safe. We were safe. After 2 weeks of settling in, the final, emotional moment arrived. Julian had joined us. He had successfully evaded surveillance in Europe, resigned from Ethelred Global in a public, meticulously timed statement that was not accusatory but allowed him to escape legal liability, and had traveled to New Zealand under the cover of a large international conference. The reunion was not a loud, dramatic scene. It was a quiet, desperate physical cling. Son, mother, daughter, and ex-wife, all holding tightly to one another on the porch of a small farm in a foreign land. We had lost everything, but we had regained each other. "Mom," Julian whispered, his voice thick with tears as he hugged me. "You saved us. Violet saved us. I did the right thing, but you carried the burden. You are the real heroes of this story." I looked at my family, a fierce protective unit forged by fire and fear. My 71 years had not been wasted in comfort. They had prepared me for this single, desperate act of protection. The immense sacrifice had bought us a profound, irreplaceable truth. The truth is, the highest cost of integrity is not money, but comfort. We had lost our home, our names, and our history, but we had found the unbreakable core of our family's courage. The lesson for all of us: the strongest force on earth is the instinct of a mother or grandmother protecting her child. Never dismiss the quiet conviction of a child. It is often the whisper of a destiny you must embrace. What would you do if you saw the phantoms? Comment below with your escape plan. Subscribe to the channel to follow our ongoing journey in New Zealand and share this story of relentless love.